One ingredient we've been seeing more and more of these days is miso. So it's not a new ingredient, but it seems to be everywhere recently. And it's the star of today's Daily Dish. Chef Paul is making the first of two recipes in what we're calling miso mania. So this one is a potato miso soup, and here's what you need to follow along. Some water, Yukon Gold potatoes, shallots, garlic, white miso, thyme leaves, black pepper, and 35% whipping cream. Okay, so Paul, do tell, what is the big deal with miso right now in this moment?
If this is miso mania, then I'm totally the miso maniac. I probably use this once a week, if not more. And the reason is because it brings big flavor. So it's a fermented soybean paste. So like most fermented things, it brings so much to the table. Things like cheese, wine, sourdough, beer. These are all fermented things, and that's why people love them so much. So when I was a kid, my grandma would always make soups and stews, and she'd say, throw a bouillon cube in there. It needs more flavor. Well, this does the same thing, except it's natural, it's fermented, it's good for your gut, and that's how I'm using it here today.
I love that. It's the umami. It's a flavor bomb. So how do we get started with this soup, Paul?
All right, so this soup is very simple. Basically, you just mix everything up in a pot, cook it, and then you puree it. So I'm going to start with the dry ingredients, let's call them. The Yukon Gold potatoes, about a kilo, 900 grams or so, that I've just peeled and roughly chopped, and some shallots. 3 large shallots, just halved. You don't really need to cut things up for this. Some garlic, 3 large cloves, as much or little as you like, whoops, and some fresh thyme. You could also use dried thyme, or if you don't have that, you could use sage in this soup. It's very versatile. And now the miso. So not only is it bringing flavor, it's also bringing salt. It's a very salty ingredient. So we're adding 1/3 of a cup, or about 6 tablespoons, and that goes right on in. And then 5 cups of water, so you don't have to use stock or anything. All that flavor is coming from the ingredients that are in the pot. 5 cups, just more than a liter. And then we're going to be really generous with the black pepper. So I'm going for like 20 turns or so. Rich things like this, and potatoes and onions and garlic, they really go nicely with a little bit of heat. But we're going to use peppercorn as heat in this one. So about 20 turns. And then that's all there is to it. Give it a little mix. It might look a little, weird and lumpy at first. Don't worry. This is going to come together. Bring it to a boil, and then down to a simmer. Cover and cook until the potatoes are fork tender. So probably about 20 minutes or so. That's it.
Paul, would you ever make this soup a bit ahead of time?
Totally. So I'm a huge batch cooker. I love to make large batches of things and then freeze 2 or 3 portions. The only thing that I would say is we're going to add a little bit of heavy cream to this after we blend it. And if you're freezing it, just skip that part. And then when you reheat it, that's when you should add the cream, because creamy soups or soups that have dairy in them, when you freeze them, things like chowder, they tend to get a little bit grainy when they're reheated. So just use that whipping cream for another recipe, and then when you reheat it, you don't even need to add whipping cream, to be honest. You can add a little bit of olive oil or a little bit of light sour cream if you're trying to lighten it up, but just add those things when you're reheating it.
That totally makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned about 20 minutes for everything to come together, and then you're going to blend it up.
And then you could pour this right into your bowls, and it's got a creamy luxuriousness to it, and you don't even have to add salt to it. I'm just going to put a little bit of sliced chive. You can garnish this with whatever you want. You could add some croutons if you wanted, maybe a little grilled cheese on the side. It's a versatile soup. You could even add the meat on top, so a little bit of crumbled bacon or some caramelized sausage. You could take it in many different ways.